Welcome to the recorded version of Home Safety for Seniors, part of the Family Caregiver Support webinar series brought to you by the American Society on Aging and a generous sponsorship from Home Instead Senior Care.
Our presenter today is Lakeland Hogan. Lakeland is a strategic partnerships representative for Home Instead Senior Care. She holds a graduate certificate in gerontology and is currently working toward a Master of Arts in social gerontology. She also holds a Master's in Business Administration and her undergraduate education focused on marketing and communication studies. Lakeland has professional experience in the private and public sectors of senior care services. She has worked on special projects for the University of Nebraska Omaha's Department of Gerontology and the local area agency on aging. She is serving in her second year as the co-chair of the Nebraska State Chapter of the Alzheimer's Association's Dementia Care Conference. Lakeland has spent several years assisting senior clients and helping their families navigate the senior care continuum. She's passionate about helping others, especially aging adults and their families. And with that, I would like to welcome our presenter today, Lakeland Hogan. Thank you for being here, Lakeland.
Thanks so much for having me. Hello, everyone. I hope the weather in your city is just as gorgeous as it is here in Omaha. We have a beautiful spring day. And this is kind of the perfect time of year to talk about home safety because we're all in the mindset of spring cleaning. So again, we're going to focus on that home safety when it, especially in concern with seniors and their home safety. And it's sometimes a hard topic for family caregivers to bring up with their senior loved one because when you talk about home safety, it starts to affect the person's sense of independence. And as professionals, we can help families have a conversation about home safety as well as give them tips to have productive conversations. So let's get started here on the next slide. As professionals, we need to inform families and educate them about the potential in-home hazards that could threaten the senior's independence and offer them resources to age in place safely. And we've learned that 20 million seniors aged 65 and older visit the emergency room each year, and almost a third of those are related to injuries, many of which are sustained in the home, where a senior, for the most part, is supposed to feel the safest. So let's look at the objectives on the next slide. Throughout today's presentation, we're going to revisit why home safety is so important and talk about some statistics. We're also going to recognize the effects of aging and how that plays out in terms of safety. And then we're also going to help family caregivers understand how the aging of a senior can affect their safety. We're also going to identify warning signs that a senior is struggling and potential dangers in the home. And I'm actually going to go through the home room by room, so we'll do that here in a little bit. And then, of course, we're going to talk about ways to help families communicate with their loved ones on these safety issues and then offer up some resources. So let's start with the research on the next slide. Home Instead, Inc. surveyed seniors and adult children in the U.S. and Canada as well as emergency room doctors in both countries. The seniors that were surveyed admitted that over one-fourth of their trips to the hospital or emergency room were caused by falls or other household accidents. We also heard that more than 85% of seniors have done nothing to prepare their homes for aging, which could help safeguard them against these accidents. I thought that was a pretty staggering statistic. I don't know about you. 85%. And then furthermore, 65% of U.S. adult children and 71% of adult children in Canada said that their parents' homes have at least one potential safety issue. And these safety issues ranged from large issues like staircase issues to smaller ones like throw rugs. But the bottom line is that safety is an issue, and it can be overwhelming for an adult child to talk to their senior loved one about these safety concerns in the home. I'm sure you all have a story of one of your loved ones that is having some home safety concerns, but my grandpa has been experiencing some weakness in his knee, and he's always been very active and agile, so this has really been hard for him. It's slowed him down, and it's also made moving around the house more difficult, and he's now walking with a cane, and so we've had to make sure that the pathways are cleared, and we've also I also recommended to him that he should have grab bars installed in his shower because the bathroom is one area that's really dangerous, and we'll talk more about that later. But my grandpa kept saying, oh, we'll get around to it. And then I'd ask him again, oh, we're looking at different companies, getting some estimates. And finally, after a near fall situation, they finally called the company and got that grab bar installed. So I know even for me as a professional working in the aging field, it was difficult to get my loved one to make the home a little safer. But that's why you're all here today, is to learn some tips and tricks that we can relay to the families we work with and hopefully not have those delays in conversation. And everyone leads busy lives, especially these family caregivers, and especially if they're working full-time. And if they're not living in the same environment as their parents, they might not catch some of these safety modifications. They also might, like my grandpa, kind of delay them or put them off because we're busy people. But these little modifications can make a world of difference in the senior's independence and well-being. So now that we've seen what the senior and family say, let's check out what the ER doctors that were surveyed have to say on the next slide. So in the U.S. and Canada, ER doctors estimated that about half of all home accidents are experienced by seniors could have been prevented. Almost half. That's crazy. And nearly all of the doctors surveyed agreed that having some help at home can reduce the risk of injuries for accidents. So seniors see home safety as somewhat of a concern, and the family caregivers definitely see it as a concern. But even the ER doctors are saying, wow, this is a big issue and we need to address this in the home. And one of the major reasons that people end up in the ER is due to falls. And I'm sure you all know plenty of seniors that have had a fall that has resulted in an ER visit. So we're going to look more specifically at falls on the next slide. So before we look at all of these home safety challenges, we have to pause and think about how the aging process can affect the safety of a senior. And first I want to start out by talking about mobility, because mobility has a huge impact on falls and fall prevention. And physical activity can go a long ways towards preventing falls because it can improve the senior's mobility. And with the doctor's approval, we should encourage families to get their loved one to be active. Activities such as walking, water aerobics, or Tai Chi can help. Even some gentle exercises like slow and graceful dancing or simple chair exercises can really go a long way in improving strength, balance, coordination, and flexibility. And those are all things that can reduce the risk of falls for a senior. We have to keep in mind that sometimes seniors avoid physical activity because they're afraid of falling. So while physical activity could help prevent falls, sometimes seniors are afraid to be active because they are afraid of falling. But you know the age-old phrase, if you don't use it, you lose it. That's so true. And so we have to remind our family caregivers that getting their loved one up and moving is so important. And as family caregivers, we really want to be doing things for our loved one, making sure that their life is easier and better. But that doesn't mean that we have to do everything for them. For example, if an adult daughter is over at her mom's house and her mom says, hey, could you go to the bedroom and grab my sweater? Naturally, that daughter is going to feel like she needs to go do that for her mom. But if she were to encourage her mom to get up and go get the sweater herself, that would give her a little extra movement throughout the day. And even though it's a small task, think of how these could add up. I don't know if you have tried out the Fitbit, that wristband that tracks your steps. It's almost like a pedometer. I have one, and it's amazing how all those little times when I get up from my desk to go grab some water or go to the restroom, or if I'm around my house getting up and doing some household chores, those steps really add up. And it's neat to see at the end of the day how many steps you truly take. And I was talking to one family. They bought their senior mother a Fitbit and encouraged her to use it. And then the family members also got them. And they had a competition. At the end of each day, they talked about how many steps they got in. And it was a fun way to get their senior loved one up and moving, as well as the rest of the family. So this is just one example, but you can really see how the benefits of movement are worth it, especially when reducing that fall risk. But something else we need to keep in mind when it comes to falls is medication. And this is one that's, I think, often overlooked. Some medicines or a combination of medications can have side effects such as dizziness or drowsiness, and this can make a fall more likely. So having a doctor or pharmacist review all the medications that a senior is on can help reduce the chance of these types of risky side effects and drug interactions. And we can tell families, if your senior loved one has started a new medication and they're exhibiting new symptoms of the dizziness or drowsiness or they're extra lethargic, that might obviously be a potential hazard for a fall, but it would be a good opportunity to get back in touch with the doctor and pharmacist and see if these symptoms are directly correlated to that new medication. So we've talked about falls, but the five senses can also change as we age and cause some safety risks. So let's look at that on the next slide. And I like to break these down into the five senses because it's another great way to help family caregivers understand the issues at hand. We need to ask these family caregivers to put themselves in their loved one's shoes and try to understand how the effects of aging can really affect their safety. And the first of the five senses I want to touch on is sight. By the time someone's 60, their pupils have decreased to about 1/3 of the size as they were at age 20. And adding to that, they might also have an eye condition such as cataracts or macular degeneration. These can cause blurriness and poor eyesight. Consider what might happen in a living room in a home if there's poor lighting, if there's throw rugs on the floor and electrical cords, and then pair that with low vision. That can be a recipe for disaster. So we have to be cautious of that. And the next sense is smell, our sense of smell. And it can diminish, especially after age 70, because of a loss in nerve endings and less mucus in the nose. And the biggest concern for seniors is the ability to smell gas, smoke, or burning food. And keep in mind that smell also affects our sense of taste. And speaking of taste, that's the next of the five senses. So we start out with about 10,000 taste buds, and then they decrease in both number and mass as we age. And we also need to consider that medications could also decrease a senior's appetite, making the individual vulnerable to malnutrition. And if you think about the impact that food has on us and our energy levels, if a senior's not eating well, they can become more lethargic and lightheaded, and this could lead to some safety issues such as falls. And then the next of the five senses is touch, our sense of touch. And there's a decreased blood flow to the nerve endings as we age, which can reduce the sensation of pain and temperature. And imagine that tingling feeling at the end of your fingers and toes, like when your arms or your feet fall asleep. That's the kind of sensation that might occur. That seniors might have that similar feeling, and they might be unable to feel if water is too hot or too cold. They also may not be able to detect slick spots on the floor. And if they lose feeling in their toes, this could lead to tripping hazards. If they lose feeling in their fingers, this could prevent them from holding on tightly to something like a grab bar. So again, these can create some safety hazards. And then the final of the five senses is hearing. Our ears control our hearing and our sense of balance, both of which can be compromised as we age. Older adults could miss out on an important visitor or service call if they can't hear the doorbell. They might not be able to hear a smoke detector in case of a fire. And they might also miss out on socializing with friends because they cannot hear the conversation. And this is why hearing aids can be so important for a senior's safety and well-being. And I don't know if any of you have participated in an age-simulating activity, but at home instead, we do this with our caregivers when they go through initial training, and it's really easy to replicate. So it's a series of activities that help to simulate some different challenges a senior might be having when their five senses change as they age. So just to give you an example, one of them would be to take a rubber glove and then in the fingertips put cotton balls, and then in the finger part of the glove put popsicle sticks. And this is supposed to simulate joint stiffness and a decreased sense of touch. So then you have them do a host of activities like tie their shoe or write a check. And it puts the caregiver in the shoes of an older adult, so they'll realize how difficult these little everyday tasks can be. So again, this just is a fun idea, a fun way to get families to better understand these the changes that a senior is going through. So now we know about the effects on aging and on home safety. So now let's go through the house room by room and identify specific hazards in the environment. So we'll get started here on the next slide. This is a picture of a really great interactive tool on makinghomesaferforsenior.com, and I'm going to walk through this tool to identify these hazards. But before we step inside the home, there are some potential hazards on the outside of the house that are important to make note of. So we're going to start there on the next slide. There are certainly a lot of hazards outside the home that a senior can encounter. And on the screen, you'll see these little pink targets, and they are strategically placed to point out specific hazard potentials. And first, let's examine the cement areas outside of the home, such as driveways and sidewalks. You want to ask or evaluate the situation to see if there are any uneven cracks in the sidewalk or in the stairs. You also want to identify if there are holes. If there's any brick paths around the house, you want to make sure that none of the bricks are loose. You make sure everything is secure. We want to eliminate any potential tripping hazards. And on the outside stairs, we want to make sure there's a proper hand railing and, if possible, a railing on both sides of the stairs. That'll help the senior go up and down more secure and safely. And you need to evaluate, are the stairs too steep for the senior? If so, a home modification such as a ramp might be necessary. And for those that live in cold climates, make sure that in the wintertime there's a plan for ice and snow removal, because when that covers the walkways, of course, it is very slippery and is a huge fall hazard. And then another thing to keep in mind is loose gravel on the walkways. I know in my neighborhood a lot of the driveways are lined with rock beds and mulch beds, so if that debris gets in the walkway, it can cause a tripping hazard. And then outside, you want to make sure that there is adequate lighting around the house. And this is a great place for motion sensors. That way, if the senior walks outside, they don't have to worry about turning on the light. It's already well lit for them. And then also identify any clutter in the yard that they might trip over, such as yard tools, shoes, that such a thing, a hose, that sort of thing. And then there's some non-visible hazards on the outside of the home, such as, are they able to hear the doorbell or someone knocking at the front door? A family might want to consider a device that enables the doorbell to trigger a flashing light, especially if they are hearing impaired. And these can hook up to lamps, or you can have a special type of strobe light for rooms that don't have lamps. But that will help the loved one know that someone's at their door. And for emergency purposes, it's really important to make sure that the home address is clearly visible from the street. So if emergency personnel are called to the house, they can easily identify the home. And again, back to those visitors at the door, if there is, I know last month we talked about senior scams, and sometimes there can be individuals that will come up and try to solicit the senior for a new roof or yard work. So if that's becoming a real safety issue, there are a lot of great new technologies out around, kind of like a peephole or a video camera that can be installed on the doorbell that can send a text message or alert to families to their smartphone to identify whoever is at the door. So you can Google that. I'm sure there's all sorts of information online, but I have heard of that working in one situation recently. And then for those with Alzheimer's and dementia, wandering outdoors is a huge issue. So make sure that all doors to the outside are secured, and then also having an alarm on the door can be helpful. And if a senior is able to unlock the door, sometimes putting the lock up high towards the top of the door keeps it out of sight for that individual, especially with Alzheimer's disease, but the family still knows where that lock is to better secure it at nighttime. So now that we've secured the outside of the house, let's move indoors on the next slide. For a lot of seniors, the living room is an area where they spend a lot of time, and there are certain hazards that exist there. First is lighting. We're going to be talking a lot about lighting today, and you need to identify in the living room if there is enough lighting. And if there is, can seniors reach the switches easily? Again, motion-censored lighting can be helpful, and touch lamps I don't know if you've seen those, but they're ones where you simply touch the base of the lamp with your finger, and it increases the light and then eventually turns it off. Or you could have lights on timers. That way the senior doesn't have to worry about shutting them off at nighttime. Another concern about the living room is temperature, as well as a concern throughout the entire house. And most seniors are always cold, so they keep their homes very warm. And I'm sure many of you that work inside seniors' homes know that. Probably have sweat through a couple shirts. I know I have. But in certain climates, for example, in the South or the Midwest, during the summer months, it can get really, really hot. So we need to make sure that the climate control is appropriate for the senior's home. Also, the walkways throughout the living room. Is there too much clutter? I'm sure you've seen a hoarder-type situation, and those are definitely situations where tripping hazards occur, but even those seniors that have excessive knickknacks or books or other just kind of stuff in their living areas, that can also be very dangerous and a fall hazard. Another thing you need to look out for are tangled electric cords that are obstructing pathways. These cords can be an issue in, again, many rooms throughout the house. So it's important to suggest that cords be run behind furniture if possible, or you might need to rearrange lamps in the room to plug into closer outlets, or even consider a power strip. That way, those cords are eliminated from the walkways. Again, that can just be a really big tripping hazard. And then you need to evaluate the condition of the carpet. Is it uneven or torn in any spots that they frequently walk through? You can have a carpet stretched or a portion of it replaced. Even for small tears, a little glue or carpet staples can fix the problem. And you want to do these in all rooms of the house, especially the living room. And then, of course, be mindful of any rugs. Are they really necessary? Are they creating a tripping hazard? I know a lot of seniors are very emotionally attached to their rugs. They have significant meanings. Maybe they were passed down to them or given to them by a special person. But you could, if it's possible, hang the rug on the wall so they can still see it every day, but it now becomes more of an art piece. But again, eliminating rugs can really help reduce risk for falling. And then pay special attention to the furniture in the living room. Is it stable? Do the conditions of the couch or the chair that they love to sit in the most make it difficult for them to get in and out of? If so, I've used this with some of my clients. I would purchase a large piece of foam and stick it under the couch cushion. That way the couch cushion was more lifted so they could get in and out easier. I've also, for a couch, the son built a platform, like a wooden platform for the couch to be set up on, and that way it was higher up for the senior to get up easily. So you want to make sure that it's at the proper height for the senior to get up, and really the proper height is if their thighs are parallel to the floor or a little bit above parallel. So again, makes it easier for them to get up. And make sure that if they need to use the arms of the chair, that those are also very stable. And in some cases, is there too much furniture? Can you eliminate a coffee table or an end table to create more room on the areas that they walk through the most? So now we've checked out the living room. Let's head into the kitchen on the next slide. This is another place for hazards. Just look at this photo. It looks a little concerning. There's a lot going on. But I think the one place in the kitchen that kind of gets overlooked in terms of safety is the refrigerator. We often don't think about that, but there's a lot of potential for hazard when it comes to spoiled food in the refrigerator. The dangers of eating outdated or spoiled food can be many things, including food poisoning. So if an older adult is unable to go to their fridge by themselves, then have a family member or friend or hire professional help in the home to help them go through the refrigerator and look at dates and throw out old items. Make sure that if they have a lot of leftovers, maybe portion half of it to eat later in the week and then stick the other half in the freezer. But make sure in the both freezer and refrigerator that all of the items are clearly marked with the expiration date. Next is kitchen utensils. If there's a risk for harming the senior, of the senior harming themselves, rather, with a sharp knife or kitchen utensils, then this might be a good time to talk with the family about putting those utensils away, locking them up, or giving them alternate tools to use in the kitchen. And if dementia is present, these sharp objects like knives can be especially dangerous. So you might want to consider locking them in one specific drawer, and then whoever is preparing food for the loved one could then have the lock to that drawer and utilize that utensil only when necessary. And then we also need to look at the counters and the cabinets. Is there a lot of clutter on the countertops? If so, that needs to be cleared to create a safe workstation or area. And if the senior has issues standing for long periods of time, try to create a workstation where the senior can sit down to prepare their food. When it comes to the cabinets, you need to evaluate if things are being stored too high or too low. Also make sure that the cabinets underneath have adequate lighting for cooking, especially when chopping on the countertop. Good lighting above the sink and the stove, those other work areas that seniors are at a lot, is also a great idea. And battery-operated light packs, it can be found at any hardware store, and you can stick them up underneath the cabinet. Then when it comes to the microwave and stove, make sure that the microwave is placed on a countertop so a senior doesn't have to reach overhead to use it. Can you imagine having to constantly lift a plate of food to put it in the microwave if you have arthritic shoulders? After some time, that might really wear on them. So if you're able to move that microwave to more of a countertop level, it'll be easier for the senior to get food in and out. Also, it's best if the stovetop controls are in front of the range so that the senior doesn't have to reach over a hot burner to adjust these controls. And if someone has Alzheimer's or dementia, taking the knobs off of the stove or even unplugging it while it's not in use can help reduce the potential for hazards. And then when it comes to the sink, we need to make sure that there's good temperature control. About 120 degrees is the recommended temperature control. Especially with those with arthritic fingers, we need to be mindful that a faucet with handles that you have to turn could be difficult for their fingers. So consider replacing that with a faucet that has a lever that's easy to move up and down. And then, of course, in the kitchen, you want to make sure that there's a working smoke detector and a lightweight fire extinguisher just in case of an emergency. And also that on the refrigerator or somewhere in the kitchen, there's easy access to emergency contact information. And when polishing those floors, especially if they're tile or wood, you want to make sure that you don't use wax because it can create a slippery situation. So the next room of the house on the next slide is the bedroom. Let's look there. And this is another room where seniors often frequent. So you want to encourage families to think through the morning and evening routines and identify potential hazards that occur during that process. Again, we need to look at the pathways in the bedroom. Are there throw rugs that are creating a tripping hazard? Again, is the carpet torn or worn? An easy suggestion for families is double-sided tape on a rug to secure it, or a rug pad. And again, these are easy fixes. You can go to your local hardware store for these. And if the carpet needs to be replaced entirely, consider a low-tread carpet rather than like a shag. This will create less resistance when a senior is walking through the bedroom, or any room of the house for that matter. And if the room is cluttered with clothing, magazines, or newspapers, that can be a tripping hazard, so make sure that clothes are getting picked up off the floor. Sometimes if a senior is having difficulty bending over, there are these great grabbers. They're a metal grabber with almost a mouth on the end that the senior can easily operate. Those are really handy for picking up clothes that have fallen on the floor so that the senior doesn't have to bend over. And then is there too much furniture in the bedroom, especially if a senior is utilizing a walker, being able to get that walker right up to the side of the bed is so important. So if the end table or side table can be taken away or moved away from the bed, that's a great way to provide more space for the senior to get in and out. And speaking of the bed, we need to make sure that the senior feels secure when getting up and into bed. So we need to make sure that the bed is at the right height. Is it too high or too low? If it's too low, the senior's knees will be above their hips when sitting on the bed. So you might want to consider bed risers under the legs that can raise the whole bed up a little bit higher. And if the bed is too high, where the senior's legs don't touch the floor when they're sitting on the edge of the bed, you can consider removing the bed frame or using a low-profile mattress or box spring. That should help fix the problem. But again, seniors get in and out of bed several times a day, as we all do, so making sure that that's a safe environment is really, really important. And again, we need to consider the lighting. Is there enough, especially on the path to the restroom in the middle of the night? I've had some families use rope lighting to create a pathway from the bed to the bathroom. I've also seen them use motion-censored night lights. So those are great ideas. And for those closets, seniors often have closets in their bedrooms, you can add a push light, again, found at any hardware store, that can illuminate dark closets because we don't want to make dressing any more difficult for the senior, or we don't want to make it difficult to find their favorite article of clothing. And then, again, we have to think about emergency situations. At night, do they have access to a telephone or a cell phone in the bedroom close to their bed? All right, on the next slide, we're going to look at one room that causes the most frequent injuries in the home. According to the survey that I referenced earlier, ER doctors reported that 69% of home injuries occur in the bathroom. 69%. That's a lot of injuries. So this is one area of the home that we want to be really sure that it's safe. And mobility plays a really important part in bathroom safety. We want to have families ask themselves if mobility and joint problems are making it difficult for the senior to reach overhead to the cabinets or comb their hair or lift their leg to get in and out of the bathtub. One of these places where mobility comes into play is getting on and off of the toilet. That's a very important part of the daily routine for all of us, so we want to make sure that the toilet is at the correct height. If you've ever been in a senior's home and seen the cupboard so if the toilet's next to the sink and there's a cupboard underneath the sink, a lot of times they'll open that cupboard and use that cupboard door to push themselves up off the toilet, or they'll grab onto the towel rack to try to stand up. So if you see those things coming loose, that might be a good indicator that the senior is grabbing onto those because they aren't able to get up off the toilet. And those items are not made to bear weight. That's when we need to consider a grab bar to be installed in those places, because grab bars are designed for bearing weight and can make it easier to get up off the toilet. You might also want to consider adding a toilet seat riser, and that's just a ring of plastic that goes underneath the toilet lid that truly elevates the toilet seat so that the senior can get on and off of it easily. And if the toilet is too high, you might have to consider a lower profile toilet seat because there's not really a fix for a toilet that's too high. And then when it comes to the tub or the shower, we need to make sure that the tub is also at the right height. A lot of older homes have a clawfoot tub or an antique tub that kind of is higher up from the ground. And in those situations, consider a transfer bench so that the senior can sit on the bench and then put their legs into the tub instead of trying to put one leg in from a standing position. You can check online or any medical supply store for various options when it comes to transfer benches. Other shower modifications include a shower chair or a bench over a tub if it's like a shower tub situation, and a handheld shower head or adjustable shower head is another quick fix that's relatively cheap. And this can help the senior adjust the shower head to the correct height or hold it while they bathe. And whether they're using a shower or a tub, a non-skid mat, one of those that suctions to the bottom of the tub or the shower, can help create more of a stable base when the senior is standing. And then when the senior is getting out of the shower, we need to make sure that that the floor doesn't get too slippery. We've been talking a lot about how rugs can be a trip hazard, but sometimes they are needed in the bathroom. We really have to be careful because we don't want them to trip over it. So we, again, want to use that double-sided tape to tape it to the ground or use a non-skid type of mat. And then bathroom, again, is where temperature control comes into play. 120 degrees is a good kind of base to keep it at. Another good idea is to make sure that the hot and cold on the bathtub is clearly labeled. And some families, especially if someone has Alzheimer's or dementia, they'll paint the entire thing red or the entire thing blue, just to make sure that that individual knows red is hot, blue is cold. So that's a suggestion you can make to a family. And then one final thing to keep in mind in the bathroom is where many seniors keep their medications. We want to make sure that they are stored properly, that they're not stored too high or too low for them to reach. But if somebody has Alzheimer's or dementia, we need to make sure that they're secured if medication could be a potential hazard to them. The next slide, we're going to look at the areas of the room, or the areas of the house that connect the rooms, which are the hallways. And I think this is a place that, again, we don't think of very often, but they are not immune to hazards. Here, lighting is a really big deal, especially at nighttime. So this is a great area to use those motion-censored night lights and rope lighting. Also, if there are stairs in the hallway, make sure that they have secure handrails, preferably on both sides. And make sure that they are clear of clutter, especially at the top and the bottom of stairs. Also, if there's a really busy pattern on the stairs, let's say they have carpet or a runner, that can be hard for seniors to distinguish where one stair starts and another stops. Again, if they have low vision, this could be a significant issue. So taking a piece of tape and lining the edge of the stairs, or even painting the bottom step if it's a cement stairway in the basement, can make a huge difference. And then, again, in case of emergencies, are there working smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors in place? And finally, the doorways entering into other rooms. Are they wide enough for a walker to fit through or a wheelchair to navigate? You might want to consider replacing hinges with swing-clear hinges. You can find those at your local hardware store, and this allows the doorway to swing completely open. And if that's not an option, sometimes taking the door off of the hinge completely gives the senior about an extra inch of space in that doorway. And especially some of the old houses have those tight bathrooms. If you take the doorway off completely, or the door, pardon me, off completely, that can add some extra space. So let's head to one room of the house on the next slide that seniors don't frequent as often but still has some hazards. Oftentimes the laundry room is found in the basement in many of seniors' homes, at least the ones that I've been in. And so again, there's stairs that might lead down there. So I want to make sure those stairs are well lit, free of clutter, and have a good railing. And then in the laundry room, there's likely to be a lot of detergent and chemicals. We need to make sure that those boxes or bottles aren't too heavy to lift. I know that some of the detergent companies make ones that sit and then they pour, so they have a little spout that pours out the detergent. That might be a nice option. That way the senior doesn't have to lift heavy detergent bottles. And if someone has Alzheimer's or dementia, they might mistake those detergent bottles for a milk jug or something, a juice jug. So you really want to be careful that if that is a situation or a hazard, a potential hazard, that those chemicals, those detergents are locked up. And then we have to be mindful of spills, water, detergent spills, maybe a leaking storm or water drain. Those can create some slipping hazards and could cause falls. And this is an area where seniors might be bending over a lot, especially those front loader washers. Those aren't the best idea for seniors because they're bending over and having to lift things in and out. So if they do have that, and if there's an option for a family member, friend, neighbor, caregiver to do laundry for them, that's probably the best option. But you can create a platform to lift those washer dryers up off the ground to make it easier for them to get in and out of. And then one final room of the house on the next slide is the garage. And again, this is an area that might be overlooked. If there's stairs, there might only be a couple leading in and out, but they need to be secure, and in a lot of cases, it's best to have a railing if possible. Also, this is an area where power tools, lawn mowers, chemicals can be kept. Want to make sure that they're easily accessible if the senior is still using them. Make sure they're not too high up or the senior has to reach. They might lose their balance. And then if someone has Alzheimer's or dementia, this could be very dangerous, so make sure that those items are locked up securely. Make sure that the garage door is working properly. And then one final thing that could take place in the garage is the trash disposal. You want to make sure that the senior can take out the trash easily, so consider a rolling trash can. And smaller trash bags could make it easier to carry the trash out. Sometimes those big bags can get really heavy. So there might be more trips to the trash can if they're using smaller bags, but again, they'll help get those steps in. And then some garbage collecting agencies will allow the seniors, if you contact them, to leave their trash outside of the garage door as opposed to walking it all the way down to the curb. So see if that's an option for you locally. Now that we've gone through all the rooms of the house, we're going to look specifically at some safety concerns on the next slide. We've touched a lot on the surfaces of the home already, driveways, stairs, carpets, rugs, but I haven't really talked about tile or hardwood, and this is tricky because it's found in a lot of kitchens or bathrooms, and there's potential for slips. So again, utilize those rubber mats or tape the rugs to the ground. And make sure that the senior is wearing non-skid shoes or socks in the home if they're walking around on these surfaces a lot. When it comes to clutter, I've talked a little bit about this, but again, being spring, it might be a good time to encourage families to work with the senior to clean out the closets. Help them get rid of stuff that they're no longer using or wearing. But you don't want to hurt their feelings, so you want to make sure to do things with them, not for them. Don't start throwing things away. I know it's tempting, but it's important to remind families that to maintain the dignity and respect, we need to work with them. Sometimes it's really helpful to install shelving or bookcases or magazine racks to store those newspapers, books, magazines that might be otherwise on the floor, creating excess in the walkways of the house. And then we talked a lot about the lighting and glare, so make sure that the family members take a look at the lighting in the home at different times of the day, because it might be different in the morning if they have a westward-facing house than it would be in the afternoon. So make sure that the family takes a look at the lighting situations throughout the day because it could change. And then make sure that everything is at an accessible height. Make sure that things aren't too high or too low. And then we want to make sure that all chemicals, tools, and trash are secured if needed or stored in a place that's easily accessible. All right, on the next slide, we're going to start looking at some solutions. So in conjunction with the University of Buffalo, Home Instead built a safety checklist that's available for download at makinghomesafeforseniors.com. And I'll have that website on the final slide here in a little bit. But this goes, again, through each room of the house, and it's a great tool for families. And I would have you suggest to a family that they go to their senior's house once a year. And you can make it a fun event that revolves around a family holiday. Maybe it's Easter or New Year's. But it gives them kind of a date to set on the calendar each year to go through the home and check for potential safety hazards. And then also on makinghomesafeforseniors.com, there's a 5 fixes under $500 resource that has some small fixes you can make throughout the home, as you can see there on the slide, that really are relatively inexpensive, but can make a huge difference in terms of safety. So before we get to the resources, I wanted to touch quickly on communications on the next slide. And communications is key in every situation. You're probably sick of me saying that because I say it on every webinar that we do, but it's so true. When you visit with families, it's really important to have them be communicating with their loved ones. Avoid arguing because it won't do anyone any good. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to maintain their dignity and respect. So have the family put themselves in the senior's shoes. How would you feel if you've been living in this house your entire life, doing everything for yourself independently, suddenly your body's changing, and so your environment is becoming less safe? So again, we need to put ourselves in their shoes as we are talking with them about the changes that we need to make to the home. And also when we're going through stuff, getting rid of stuff, making sure that we're doing it together with them. And if we do this at have more of a team approach where we're all working together as opposed to the senior versus the adult child, it's going to be a better situation for everyone. And if we're empathetic to what the senior is going through, if we're understanding, it can make it an easier situation. And it's really important to listen. I find that when I talk about senior safety in the home, the senior, when we suggest that we need to take the rug away, there's a story behind the rug. Or when we need to move a piece of furniture, there's a great story behind that piece of furniture. And it's easy to get caught up in getting rid of things or rushing through the process. But take the time to really listen to the senior. Enjoy those stories, especially because they might be stories you've never heard before. You might not even realize that this artifact that you pass by every day at your mom and dad's house has a really incredible story behind it. So just enjoy it and make the most of the situation. Make it fun. So finally, let's look at some resources on the next slide. I have the website for that University of Buffalo Home Safety Assessment tool. There's also a great site, Certified Aging in Place Specialists. That site is listed there. Our MakingHomeSafeForSeniors.com website's listed. And then, of course, your National Safety Council, whether in the U.S. or Canada, those are great places to turn for some additional safety tips. So I'm going to now open it up for questions on the next slide. And Lanita is going to join me. Lanita is our healthcare strategist here at Home Instead, and she's a registered nurse. So she can help answer some questions too. So Steve, any questions?
Yes, thank you very much, Lakeland, and welcome, Lanita. It is time for the Q&A portion of today's webinar, everybody, so send in those questions. And let's get to them right here. The first question for you, are you aware of any pre-made platforms for couches, beds, etc., for older adults who perhaps don't have someone available to build a platform? You know, is there anything available at Lowe's or Home Depot or anything like that that you might be able to recommend?
Yes, I've seen, they're called bed risers. They're these pieces of plastic that have kind of a cutout in the middle for the leg of the bed to sit on. Those would also work well for couches if the couch has little feet to them. I hope that makes sense. When it comes to the platforms, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, all beds are different sizes. All couches are different sizes. So I would recommend the bed risers first because those are more likely to be available at hardware stores and those types of places.
Okay. Do you have any suggestions for older adults who are hoarders and they are not willing to declutter their areas for safety reasons?
That's really tough. I know that seniors sometimes get really emotionally attached to their items. And so when it comes to clutter and hoarding, I know on caregiverstress.com we have some really great tips and advice. So if you go to caregiverstress.com and type in the word clutter, we have a guide, or Caregiver's Guide to Stop Clutter. So that would be a great resource. And we go through each room of the home, and we also have some frequently asked questions. So for that individual, I would suggest going to caregiverstress.com and type in the keywords clutter, and you'll get some good tips and advice there.
Okay. You know, for the last hour, we've been talking about a lot of, general but yet very helpful suggestions here. But what is a situation that might warrant a referral to like a perhaps professional occupational therapist as opposed to kind of more of the straightforward things that we've been talking about here today?
That's a great question. Yeah, when it comes to this mobility issue in the home, occupational therapists are great resources because that's really their job, is making sure that seniors can live in their environment successfully. So in that situation, I would turn to the individual's physician or doctor and explain the situation and explain why occupational therapy would be a good option for the individual. And then hopefully the physician will agree and write a prescription for occupational therapy in the home. That way it can hopefully be covered by their insurance. But I would refer to the physician.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about some of these ideas and suggestions that are relevant to older adults with moderate versus mild or major cognitive decline? A little bit of a differentiation there, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, if an individual has moderate cognitive decline and they're still living in their home independently, I guess it really kind of comes down to what rooms of the home that they frequent the most. I would say start with those rooms. Make sure that those rooms are extra safe. Make sure that there are really great working smoke detectors. Make sure that they're, make sure that if there is an emergency that the senior can get help quickly. I would suggest at the moderate stage having a caregiver or family member or neighbor check in on them at least daily. That way, if there is a safety hazard that comes up, because people move things around their house all the time. I know I do. I'm constantly moving things around in my house. A new safety concern can pop up even from day to day. So having an extra set of eyes and ears on the home, in the home, can be a great way to prevent additional hazards that could pop up.
Okay. Next question. Do you have any resources for funding for safety improvements?
That is a great question. I would contact the local area agency on aging, and N4A, the letter N, the number 4A.org. That is where you can find the area agency on aging closest to you. It really depends on your specific agency. I know in my city, there is some funding to help seniors with home modifications, or there are volunteers that will come in and provide some kind of handyman services. And because it's through the area agency on aging, they do background checks on these individuals and make sure that they are, honest and they aren't going to that they don't have any prior criminal history. So I would look to your area agency on aging. They should be able to give you some additional resources.
There's also a website, USA.gov, that is dedicated to help seniors repairing and improving their home. It has a lot of other things on it, too, but that's one of the items on it.
Awesome. Thanks, Lenita.
Right. We've been talking about safety here, obviously, for the last hour. Next question is, one thing that I didn't see addressed was driving. How do you suggest this is approached in regards to safe driving, or perhaps limiting driving or ending driving? Before I turn that question over to you, presenters, I am just going to let you know that coincidentally that is the topic of our next webinar in June, Seniors and Driving.
That's what I was going to say.
Yes. So,
you can tune in next month and hear all about it.
We're going to talk in depth about that next month, and you're going to receive a link to register for that webinar in the follow-up email that you'll receive later on today. But if you could just touch on that here today, it is a good point. We've talked about the home, but we're talking about safety. What about that?
Yeah, that is a huge safety concern, and that's why we are talking about it next month. But again, on caregiverstress.com, there is a resource called Let's Talk About Driving, and it has great tips and tools on bringing up the conversation around driving, but for individuals that are still driving, it can be a safety concern not only for the seniors themselves, but for the community in general. So if an individual is really, or if you're concerned about an individual, in most cities there is an anonymous reporting through the local DMV. So you can call your local DMV to report anonymously that you're concerned about a specific individual's driving abilities. And you can also go to your that individual's physician and have the physician talk to the individual about driving and have the physician evaluate if it's safe for them. And that way it's not coming from the family caregiver. You're really putting the blame on the doctor, and that takes the family caregiver out of it, because I know that can be such a touchy situation, and it's really a huge loss of independence, because if you think about your daily life, I just think about how many different places I drive every day. So giving that up is so difficult. But I'll talk more about this next month. And when you do have to take the keys away, you want to make sure that you have a plan in place to help that senior still get around to the places that they want to go. So again, refer to your local DMV, refer to your physician, and then tune in next month to hear more about that topic.
All right. Can you talk a little bit about any new innovations in technology that relate to home safety? You can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm not up to date on every single one. There's so many. Technology is always changing. But there are a lot of home monitoring systems. There are some wireless home safety security systems that have cameras and smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors that are all linked somehow, and it's a smart system that can link to your cell phone. So if you're an adult child, you can kind of monitor what's happening in the home when people come and go. There's also, like I mentioned, there's a doorbell that has a video camera on it, so you can put that in place of the doorbell to monitor who's coming and going. And then there are also, you can utilize those Fitbits to see how active your loved one is. You can have them hooked up to a smart device, that sort of thing. So there's tons of stuff out there. You do want to be careful that you're using a product that has good reviews. So I would read the online reviews and talk to other families and see if they've used it, just because if one person's had success with it, it's likely that others will have success as well. So I wish I had a better answer for that, but those are some of the recent technology innovations I've seen when it comes to.
And we do have a couple of those type of technology ideas available on caregiverstrust.com.
Right,
Perfect.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's a great resource.
Well, Lakeland and Lanita, unfortunately, we have reached the end of our hour here, and we're just about out of time for today's webinar. But I want to thank you for joining us today for an excellent presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.